What if Captain Rex was the secret mentor of Luke Skywalker in military strategy? The war was over. The Empire had fallen, its remnants scattered across the stars. But the war never truly ended. Captain Rex had spent years in shadows, watching the galaxy shift, observing the rise and fall of the rebellion, and hearing the whispers of a Jedi who had restored balance. Luke Skywalker. He had never met the boy, only heard stories of his exploits. A farm boy from Tatooine, heir to the Jedi, the one who had stood against Darth Vader and the Emperor himself. But when Rex first laid eyes on him, standing among the victorious rebels after the Battle of Endor, his heart clenched. Luke moved like him. His stance, his quiet confidence, the way his eyes scanned his surroundings as if seeing everything at once. It was Anakin Skywalker. For a moment, Rex wasn't on Endor. He was back on the Resolute, standing beside the man who had been both his general and his friend. The man who had fought for the Republic with every ounce of his being, who had thrown himself into battle without hesitation, who had trusted Rex with his life. And yet, it was Anakin's son standing before him now. Luke noticed the old clone studying him. He turned, offering a polite smile. "Captain Rex, I presume." Rex hesitated, swallowing down the emotions rising in his chest. He clenched a fist over his heart in salute. "That's me, General Skywalker." Luke's smile faltered. "I'm not a general." Rex smirked slightly, shaking his head. "Sorry, old habits." Rex knew the boy had learned the truth, had seen what his father had become, but he also saw something else in Luke's expression. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, his father had been more than Darth Vader. "I'd like to talk to you," Rex said, "about your father, about the man he was." Luke's blue eyes met Rex's, full of curiosity and longing. "I'd like that." And with that, the last surviving clone captain and the last Jedi walked together. The night was quiet on Endor, the embers of celebration still flickering in the distance. But here, at the edge of the rebel encampment, two men sat beside a small fire, one old, weary, and carrying the weight of countless battles, the other young, full of questions, and searching for answers about a father he barely knew. Luke leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "Tell me about him," he said softly. "Not Vader. My father, Anakin Skywalker." Rex exhaled slowly, staring into the flames. "He was the finest warrior I ever knew. The best general in the Grand Army of the Republic." He shook his head, a small, distant smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "And the most reckless one." Luke tilted his head, intrigued. Rex chuckled. "You have no idea how many times we had to save his skin because he'd charged straight into battle without a second thought. I can't count the number of times I told him, 'General, maybe we should wait for reinforcements.' And he'd just grin and say, 'We are the reinforcements, Rex.'" Luke's lips quirked into a small smile. "He was a brother to us," Rex continued, his voice thick with old memories. "Some Jedi kept their distance from us clones, saw us as soldiers, not people, but not Anakin. He fought beside us, bled with us, laughed with us." His expression darkened. "He cared about us. That's what made him different." Luke was silent for a moment before speaking. "And Ahsoka?" Rex's smile returned, this time a little more genuine. "Ah, Snips. She was something else." Luke's brow furrowed. "Snips?" Rex chuckled. "Anakin gave her that name. She was his Padawan, his student. Young, stubborn, and smart. Anakin trained her himself, pushed her harder than any other Jedi would have, and she turned out to be one of the best. Luke seemed to take this in carefully. And you, he trusted you. Rex met Luke's gaze, with his life. There was a pause. Luke's fingers curled slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. Then why did Vader? Rex sighed. I ask myself that every day, kid. Silence settled between them, the fire crackling softly. Luke looked down, lost in thought. Then Rex spoke again, his voice steadier. But that's not all you need to know about him. Your father wasn't just a warrior, Luke. He was a tactician, the best battlefield commander I ever saw. He could outmaneuver entire separatist fleets, predict enemy movements before they happened, and turn the tide of a battle in seconds. Luke's eyes sharpened with interest. Rex leaned forward. That's why I want to teach you. Luke blinked. Teach me? Rex nodded. The Jedi were warriors, but they weren't soldiers. They never trained you to command. If you're going to lead the future of the Jedi, you need to know how to fight a war and win. Luke hesitated. I don't want to fight another war. Rex sighed. Neither do I. But the Empire's remnants won't go down without a fight. You need to be ready. Luke studied the own clone for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. All right, teach me. Good. We start at sunrise. The forest clearing was silent except for the chirping of distant birds and the rustling of leaves. The sun had barely risen, casting golden light over the dew-covered ground. Luke stood in the middle of the clearing, dressed in his simple tunic, watching as Rex paced before him, hands behind his back. You may be the last Jedi, Rex began, but you don't have the training of a general. He met Luke's gaze. You were thrown into a war with the rebellion, but no one ever taught you how to command troops, how to read a battlefield, or how to think like a soldier. Luke nodded. He had led missions, made strategic decisions, but everything he knew had been learned in the moment, through instinct, trial, and error. He had never had a mentor in war, not the way his father had been trained. Rex bent down and picked up a long stick from the ground. Your father knew how to fight a war on every front. Space, ground, infiltration, siege. And that's what I want to teach you. He pointed the stick at Luke. Lesson 1. A soldier fights. A commander thinks. If you lead men into battle, you need to be 3 steps ahead of the enemy before the first shot is fired. Luke folded his arms. And how do I do that? Rex smirked. By playing war. He gestured towards a set of rough stones and branches he had arranged on the ground. Luke stepped closer and saw that it was a battlefield simulation, a miniature recreation of a skirmish. Small stones represented troops, while twigs marked terrain. This, Rex said, kneeling beside it, is a recreation of the Battle of Jabim, one of the worst losses in the Clone Wars. He pointed at one side. Republic forces here. Separatists here. Now, tell me, how would you win this battle? Luke crouched beside him, studying the setup. He saw the Republic troops positioned on high ground, with the Separatists below in the valley. It looked like a good position. The high ground gives the Republic an advantage. I'd hold position and force the enemy to attack uphill. Rex grunted. That's what General Lesk thought, and it got him and half his forces killed. Luke frowned. Why? Rex pointed at the Separatist side. They knew the Republic would rely on their high ground advantage, so they set up artillery in the surrounding ridges, boxed them in, and rained fire on them. The Republic was so focused on holding position, they didn't realize they were being surrounded. Luke exhaled sharply. So what should they have done? Rex moved a few stones. Instead of holding, they should have sent a small strike team to take the ridges first. Then, when the main attack came, they wouldn't have been trapped. Luke nodded slowly. It was a simple, yet brutal lesson. Wars are won before the first shot is fired, kid, Rex said, standing up. You don't fight the enemy's battle. You make them fight yours. Luke absorbed the words, looking down at the battlefield. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that war wasn't just about strength or courage. It was about outthinking the enemy at every turn. Rex patted him on the shoulder. Let's see if you can put that to use. It wasn't long before Luke got his chance to apply what he learned. A New Republic scout team had picked up signals from an Imperial remnant stronghold on a remote world in Mid-Rim. Intelligence suggested that a warlord, a former Imperial officer clinging to the old ways, was using the outpost as a base to regroup his forces. The New Republic needed the base neutralized before it could become a greater threat. Luke had volunteered to lead the mission. Rex had insisted on coming with him. This is your test, he had said. You lead. I'll advise. Now, standing aboard a New Republic shuttle, looking at the holomap of the Imperial base, Luke felt the weight of command for the first time. The mission had seemed simple at first. Destroy the command center, scatter the remaining forces. But now, as he looked at the enemy's positioning, he realized it was anything but. The base is heavily fortified, a New Republic officer pointed out. Anti-air turrets, stormtrooper garrisons, patrols. A direct assault would be suicide. Luke nodded. Then we don't attack them directly. Rex smirked in the background, arms folded. Luke pointed to the map. We send a small team to disable the anti-air defenses first. Once that's done, we'll launch a distraction at the main gate, while a second team infiltrates from the eastern ridge and takes out their command center. One of the officers frowned. That's risky. If the infiltration team fails, the main force will be exposed. Luke took a deep breath, steadying himself. It's a risk, but if we move fast enough, the enemy won't have time to react. Rex gave him the nod of approval. The team was on the ground. The first stage of battle was silent. The infiltration team, Luke, Rex, and a handful of New Republic commandos moved through the underbrush, avoiding patrols. The base loomed ahead, massive Durasteel walls towering over them. Luke held up a hand, signaling the team to stop. Through his macro binoculars, he spotted the anti-air turrets perched atop a tower. They were well guarded, but not invulnerable. He turned to Rex. We need a way to get inside. Rex scanned the area, then pointed to a maintenance tunnel near the base of the tower. There. It's risky, but it'll get us where we need to go. Luke nodded. Then that's our way in. They moved quickly, slipping through the tunnel unnoticed. Once inside, they climbed a ladder leading directly to the control room. 2 stormtroopers stood guard. Luke activated his lightsaber. Before the troopers could react, he struck, his blade flashing in the dim light. The guards crumpled. The team moved inside, placing explosive on the turret's control panel. Luke keyed his comm. Turrets are going down. Get ready to move. Seconds later, a series of explosions ripped through the tower. Alarms blared across the base. Then, the full assault began. Outside, New Republic forces launched their attack. Blaster fire erupted as soldiers stormed the front gate, drawing Imperial attention away from the infiltration team. From above, Luke and Rex watched the battle unfold. Not bad, kid. Not bad at all. Luke exhaled. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, he understood what it meant to truly be a commander. days after their victory against the Imperial Remnant outpost. Luke and Rex were called to an emergency mission on the planet Jakros 5, a barren, war-torn world deep in the Mid-Rim. An Imperial warlord had entrenched himself in a fortified city, using it as his last stand for his dwindling forces. The New Republic needed the city liberated, but every assault had been repelled by heavy defenses, brutal urban warfare, and a well-coordinated stormtrooper resistance. Luke, now self-proven as a commander, was given the authority to lead the operation. Rex, standing beside him in the New Republic war room, studied the battle plans with a grim expression. "Urban warfare is the worst kind," he muttered. "Too many variables, too many places to get ambushed." Luke exhaled. "Then we'll have to outmaneuver them." Rex looked at him. "Are you sure about this, kid?" Luke nodded. "We have to win this battle, and I need you with me." Rex sighed, rubbing his temples. "Well, someone's got to make sure you don't get yourself killed." With that, the two prepared for their most difficult battle yet. The landing transport shook violently as blaster fire erupted from below. The sky over Jakros 5 was filled with the thunder of war. TIE fighters streaking overhead, New Republic X-Wings dogfighting in the clouds, and artillery shells slamming into the ruined buildings of the city. Luke, standing in the troop bay of his transport, gripped his lightsaber tightly. Across from him, Rex adjusted his blaster, wearing his old Phase 2 clone armor. "This one's gonna be tough," Rex muttered, looking at the men around him. "We need to hit them, hard and fast." The transport shuddered as it broke through the cloud cover. Below them, the ruined city stretched for miles, a wasteland of broken skyscrapers, abandoned speeders, and shattered streets. Then came the enemy fire. Turbolaser blasts streaked up from the city, hammering the New Republic gunships. One transport exploded in a fiery burst, sending debris raining down. Another was hit, spiraling out of control before slamming into a building. Luke grimaced. "It's already a massacre." The pilot's voice crackled over the comm. "Brace for impact! Dropping in 5! The ramp blew open and the troopers jumped into the inferno. Luke ignited his lightsaber mid-air, deflecting blaster bolts as he and Rex descended into the chaos. The battle was a nightmare. New Republic troops poured into the city, fighting block by block, as stormtroopers used the ruins as choke points. Blaster fire rained from the windows of bombed-out buildings, snipers picking off soldiers in the streets. Luke fought on the front lines, cutting through stormtroopers, deflecting fire, and leading his men forward. Rex, blaster in hand, barked out orders. "Push forward! Take that alleyway! Move! Move!" TIE fighters screamed overhead, strafing the New Republic forces, forcing them to take cover behind wrecked vehicles. Explosions rocked the streets. The casualties were piling up. Luke could feel it in the Force. The despair, the pain, the overwhelming loss. The realization struck him. We're losing. The New Republic forces were pinned. Luke's entire platoon, more than 50 soldiers, were trapped in Central Plaza, surrounded on all sides. Heavy E-Web turrets cut down anyone who moved. Reinforcements weren't coming. Luke panted, crouched behind a pile of rubble. His robes burned, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. Across from him, Rex reloaded his blaster, gritting his teeth. "We have to pull back." Luke clenched his fists. "We can't. If we retreat, the Imperials will take the city." Rex looked around at the bodies, the dying, the broken remains of their platoon. His voice hardened. "There's no one left to hold it, Luke." A burning sensation grew in Luke's chest. Failure. He could feel it seeping into his soul. Then an explosion rocked the plaza, an Imperial walker rounding the corner. The few remaining troopers fought desperately, but it was hopeless. One by one they fell, until it was only Luke and Rex left. As the battle reached its darkest moment, Luke and Rex were forced to run. Blaster fire chased them through the ruins. Luke ignited his saber, deflecting bolts as he sprinted. Rex moved beside him, covering his flank, taking down troopers as they ran. They slid into a ruined building, taking shelter in the shadows. Their platoon was gone. Luke fell against the wall, gasping for breath. His mind swam with guilt, pain, and exhaustion. In that moment, Rex turned to him and shouted, "Anakin, we need to move!" Silence. Luke's breath caught in his throat. His entire body tensed. He looked up at Rex wide-eyed. Rex froze, his expression shattered. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was heavy, filled with something deeper than words. Rex's mouth opened, then closed. His hands trembled. He took a step back. His eyes haunted. I... His voice broke. Luke's face softened. Rex. Rex clenched his fists. He turned away, his breath shaking. "You remind me of him, kid. Too much." The weight of the war, of the past, of Anakin Skywalker pressed down on them both. For a moment, Rex wasn't here. He wasn't on Jackros 5. He was back in the Clone Wars, fighting alongside his general. The emotions cracked through his voice. "I fought alongside your father for years. I trusted him. I believed in him. And then, I watched him fall." Luke placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm not him." Rex inhaled deeply. Then, with quiet resolve, he nodded. "No, you're not." They barely made it out of the city alive. Luke and Rex, the last survivors of their platoon, slipped through Imperial patrols, commandeered a stolen speeder, and blasted their way off-world. The New Republic, realizing the mission was lost, called for a full retreat. Jackros 5 remained in Imperial hands. They had lost. Back on the New Republic flagship, Luke sat in silence, staring at the stars. The loss weighed on him, but more than that, it was Rex's words that lingered. The way he had looked at Luke, the way he had said, "Anakin." Rex sat beside him, arms crossed, deep in thought. Finally, Luke broke the silence. "Rex, will you stay?" Rex turned to him. "Of course. After defeat, you need a teacher now, more than ever." Luke nodded. Rex exhaled. Then, with a small smirk, he patted Luke on the back. "Alright, kid. Lesson 2. Drop the scenarios you would like to see in the comments, and I will pick one every week for Fan Friday. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.